Hello and welcome to our GCP-Mindset channel. Today we have a remote interview, our first remote interview due to the distance to our interview partner, but also of course because of COVID. And I have here with me Deepa Arora. Deepa is a director of CLINEXEL, Indian CRO, and we speak today about clinical studies in India. Thanks for being here, Deepa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Deepa. Thanks for being here once again. It's a pleasure to speak with you about clinical research in India. Very interesting topic because India, as we all know, it's a huge country with a lot of people, with a lot of patients. But please tell me a little bit more about India from your side, please.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a physician by education, and I have almost 2 decades of experience in clinical research and pharmacovigilance in pharma companies before I founded CLINEXEL. So I worked in the clinical development of NCs, biosimilars, uh, complex generics, and of course simple generics also. Uh, so India is a interesting place, I would say, and we are a peace-loving nation. It's a democratic country, and if you just want to say one thing about in India, it's unity in diversity. So we are diverse. We are a very diverse population, 1.3 billion people with different culture, different geography, climate, and of course, our susceptibility to disease. We speak different languages, but still we are together as one country. So, in terms of when it comes to clinical trials, we have a central government, central licensing authority, and we have state governments. So, but for clinical trials, it's only the central licensing authority that approves the clinical trials. The structure is more like, US, where there is one FDA. So we have one central licensing authority.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Very interesting and very impressive also. I know the Indians as very polite people, very kind people. I have a couple of co-workers coming from India, and they are also very smart people. Um, but what makes India to a good environment for clinical research, and for which kind of clinical research? What would you say?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, that there is we are a totally diverse population, and we have been striving together and thriving together. So we are very good in collaboration. We understand the sensitivities, cross-cultural sensitivities. So we generally perform very well in the cross-cultural environment. So in the global trials, India has been taking a very lead role since late 90s, I would say. There was a little bit of setback in between, but now things are again, I'll talk about that during when we talk about the regulations. So uh, we had India plays a very key role, and when it comes to the go-to destination for clinical trials, like I mentioned, we are a large population, and we have a very good healthcare system, which is like world-class facilities. It's a go-to place now for medical tourism, India, and we have some like a significant proportion of population who are not so fortunate to get the healthcare facilities. So we have a treatment naive population also. Uh, we have a significant burden of infectious diseases, uh, which like tuberculosis is rampant here. We have a lot of respiratory diseases. Then on the other hand, we also have a population which is very prone to uh, lifestyle disorders. Like India is the diabetes capital of the world. We have 50 million population suffering from type 2 diabetes, and more than a million, I think it's 1.5 million cancer patients. So we have uh, all sorts of, because of our population, we have significant proportion of all types of patients suffering from all types of diseases. And we also have a huge healthcare population, healthcare professionals. So we have a million doctors, registered doctors, about 3 million registered nurses, and equally huge number of pharmacists, dentists, physiotherapists. So all health professionals are there. So this makes India a very interesting place for clinical trials, because you have like sites who understand who understand the best of healthcare management, who can treat patients as per your standard of care which you follow in US or Europe. Sites are open to accept that and follow that. So that is one advantage. There are no restrictions that they cannot do that. Uh, and then there is like their understanding of GCP is very good, and they all speak English. They have been inspected frequently, so they understand the importance of
Yeah.
following and complying with GCP.
Okay. So I hear the biggest advantage is you have from everything a lot. Yeah, a lot of patients, a lot of people, a lot of investigators, a lot of sites. That's of course very good when you run clinical studies. You mentioned already the regulations of India. Can you tell me a little bit more about the regulatory framework in India in terms of clinical studies?
Yeah. So in 2019, March 2019, we saw a complete overhaul of trial regulations. Actually, Indian regulators had been working for longer, like they worked almost from 2015-16 on revising the regulations. They had meetings, they had trainings the regulators from US FDA, from EU, and they tried to understand what are the best practices in clinical trial regulations that are being followed there. There were a lot of stakeholder meetings where they met with industry, understood the challenges. They were, of course, meeting with investigators, understanding their perspectives. So all this was like, there were the curtain raiser came in 2019 March, when we had new clinical trial rules. So it's called NDCTR 2019, New Drug Clinical Trial Rules. That completely abolished whatever was there earlier. So these NDCTR, I would say, is one of the best things that has happened uh, to clinical research industry in India, because now we have very transparent regulations which are which have been developed adopting the best practices from the learnings from other regulators. And we got a lot of support from, I would say, FDA and EU authorities in developing the regulations. And then these are like time bound approvals are there and very transparent. So with the NDCTR, I think we are at par with what regulations are being followed in other countries. And what would you expect in a GCP environment?
Okay. So what is the time frame? So when do you get an approval after submission? After how many weeks?
So it's like they say that if there are different timelines, if it's a bioequivalent study or it's a global clinical trial, or there are regulations differ a little bit. If for example, if a product is developed in India, you can conduct a phase one in India. But if a product is not developed in India, you cannot do a phase one in India. You have
Okay.
to do phase one elsewhere. Similarly, phase two, it has to be a parallel clinical development. So, uh, like typically, 90 days is the maximum time when they say that you can get an approval. But approvals generally come earlier if there are no concerns, if there are parallel trials happening elsewhere. And then, depending on the type of the trial, also it may differ slightly.
Okay, 90 days. Very similar to Europe. You mentioned already the development process in India, and who's developing? Do you have and we all know the software industry is very strong in India, and you have a lot of software developer there. But how is it in terms of medical companies? So pharma companies, biotech, medtech companies. Do you have also such companies in India?
Actually, India is very much advanced in software, and India is also known as the pharmacy of the world. Uh,
Okay.
Indians have very strong, development uh, and successfully delivered in the development of generics. Innovators, still innovative drugs, if I say, uh, Indian industries, the large pharma companies, they all have a huge R&D setup. They have a biosimilar unit also. So they have been spending significant amount of, money on they it's like around some companies are spending up to 10% of their annual turnover, 10 to 12% on R&D. But the results are not very good if we compare with that in terms of innovative products. For generics, for biosimilars, we are doing extremely good. We have 1,200 medical device companies in India. So, and even during the COVID, these medical device companies, they came up quickly uh, uh, and multiplied the production of PPE sanitizers by many times. Like we could meet in sometime we could meet all our requirements of the huge population from the country uh, in a very short period of 2 3 months after the COVID pandemic started. So uh, it's in India we have like pharma companies and biotech companies who are delivering, and government of India is also trying to support because everybody is realizing that is pinching everyone that we don't have innovative products from India. So there are various programs started by government of India by in terms of like there's a biotechnology department and they have started funding smart startups, biotechs through ignition grants, seed funding. So I'm hoping that we will see more proportion of innovative drugs coming from India in future.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. In terms of study sites, which are so important for clinical studies, to have good investigators, good study nurses on board, what would you say about the structure in India? Do we have a lot of good investigators? Do we have well educated study nurses, study coordinator? You said already most of them speak English, but do they really have a deep understanding of quality, data integrity, patient rights, patient safety?
Yeah, so the investigator sites are very well developed in India. Uh, Investigators understand the importance of uh, conducting clinical trials in a GCP environment. They are well trained in GCP and they are very open in learning more whenever there is a new requirement for the study. They understand, they respect what is required for the study, and they are very keen to follow that. They're very motivated, I would say, and enthusiastic. Uh, in fact, they feel proud to be a part of innovative drug development. So we see a lot of support from trial sites. Even like we see them participating very well during audits, preparation for audits, and during audits. So and these investigators are very well supported by clinical research units in the organization, or by management organization, SMOs. So
Okay.
we have very good structure.
Yeah. Well, what kind of study sites join studies? Do you also have GPs who are joining studies, or are they university clinics only, or governmental hospitals, or city hospitals? What kind of study sites do you involve?
Yeah. So actually, we involve mainly the university hospitals, which are tertiary healthcare centers in India. These are the university, you can say, or medical colleges are there. So they are mostly involved in the clinical trials. Then we have a lot of corporate hospitals who have developed clinical research units, and investigators there are very much interested in participating in the clinical trials. So we have corporate hospitals also equally participating in the clinical trials. Some trust hospitals are also there, which are very good. Less of GP involvement in global clinical trials, but otherwise for clinical trials which are meant mostly post-marketing studies, their GPs are more involved, but otherwise not for global clinical
Yeah. Okay. If you do a study with diabetes type 2B, you said already that's also a growing problem in India. These are overweight or obese patients. Are they treated at the hospitals, or do these patients go to the GPs to get treatment?
So, what they go to GPs also, and they are treated at hospitals also. We get a very good pool because
Yeah.
actually numbers are very huge, so we get a good pool.
Okay, great, thanks. What is in terms of inspections? So competent authorities approve studies, but they also inspect studies. How much experience do you have with inspections in India?
Uh, India, as like I mentioned, India had like we have a lot of sites, and these sites have actively participated in new product developments. So we have all authorities, all health authorities, regulatory authorities have audited Indian sites, I would say, and more so there are large number of bioequivalence, the bioavailability BAB studies being conducted. So those CROs are also there. So those are also regularly audited. But for patient studies, it's mainly USFDA. USFDA has an office in India uh, uh, dedicated to conducting inspections in India, GMP, GCP, uh, and pharmacovigilance inspections also. So the USFDA, MHRA has been very regularly auditing Indian sites, and the EU authority.
Okay, yeah. Okay, then it's also very common nowadays that competent authorities from the US, from Europe are coming to inspect the sites, CROs probably as well, and also sponsors. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you talk about DABs or CROs, they would have been, I'm sure, uh, every authority would have audited one or more CROs in India. So
Okay.
including
Yeah.
all CIS countries, LATAM countries, and of course European
Yeah.
countries.
Yeah. As you know, unfortunately, I was not yet in India, but I wanted to visit it, you once. And but when I have planned to come to you to Mumbai, you told me, Andreas, take care. It's not so safe here in Mumbai. You cannot just walk from the hotel to your office. And in addition, and that's what I have read at least on the corruption perception index, that India is also known for higher corruption rate compared to other countries. Does it does this have any impact on clinical studies? Yeah, the safety in the cities, the corruption rate, does it influence the studies negatively somehow?
So, Andreas, when I asked you not to walk from your hotel to office,
Yeah.
it was not like US that you can't walk. It's like
Okay.
we don't have, we don't have safe walking tracks for pedestrians. You know,
Okay.
so that is traffic is huge, and sometimes you can't expect that if there is a signal is not green, people will still not be during that signals also people jump signals.
So we don't have a crime problem, a traffic problem.
That was a traffic problem. That was
Okay.
otherwise Mumbai is very safe. If you can handle the traffic, you can move go anytime. There is no
Okay.
night in Mumbai, so you
Okay.
can
Perfect.
walk even
Yeah.
at 3 a.m. That will be safer from the traffic perspective, but then you
Okay. That
still
was a
don't.
misunderstanding. Sorry.
So, yeah, but it's like. It's unfortunate that we are doing so poorly on corruption index or the corruption perceptions index. I feel very bad about it. But when it comes to clinical trials, I think here we are not impacted because of that corruption index. Because you know, clinical trials are conducted by professionals, educated people who understand what is required, And there is a focus from the government of India also to facilitate that the trials are conducted as required. It's mainly we have regulations, even for other things we have regulations. Implementation is poor. That's why we score so poorly. But that's not the case in case of these clinical trials. There is a willingness from the sponsors also that trials are conducted in a proper way. There's a full dedication, full willingness from the investigators' side, and also they want the trials to be conducted properly, and we are there to monitor as CROs. So I would say that trials are not at all impacted by this. There is no impact of corruption on clinical trials that
Okay.
you can.
Okay, great. Good to hear. I mean, now during the COVID crisis, everybody speaks about remote monitoring and how we can verify data without going to the sites. How does it look like in India? Is it possible? Do you have in all the cities internet connection where you can get also remote access to data? And how do you comply with data protection?
So, out of a population of 1.3 billion, one third of the population has access to 4G data, mobile and
Okay.
4G data. So, connectivity is pretty good. Of course, that's a criteria for the site selection also, even like before COVID. And most of we have good connectivity across India, so that's not an issue. And people were very well familiar with the concept of centralized remote monitoring and risk-based monitoring uh, before COVID also, but we still love to travel, meet site investigators and site personnel in person. So prior to COVID, I would say that most of the site monitoring visits were happening in person. So people were traveling, meeting. There were lots and lots of travel happening. And we were always working from office, not from home. Mostly we used to work from office. But this has significantly changed during the COVID time. There are most of the COVID trials. I would say I cannot claim for all, but as much as I am aware, COVID trials there was totally remote monitoring. Other studies also people are moving towards centralized remote monitoring. So that is there, and I guess with this experience in future, still people will prefer to travel. There's a personalized connect that people are going to do there, but we will see more of hybrid structure there. You know, where centralized remote monitoring can reduce the at least time at the site, if not and cut down some visits. But it will not be
Yeah.
totally eliminated. We'll see more of hybrid environment.
Okay, so you are also very open to the new ways of doing monitoring.
Yes, of course. Technology, people are very tech savvy in India.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So I think India has a lot of opportunities for our industry for clinical studies because of the huge number of people there and patients, and you have a very modern country with India. Um, what would you recommend to a sponsor who says, yes, I want to try doing studies in India? What are no-goes? What would you advise them to do? What's really mandatory to do?
Uh, yeah. So I would say that for uh, any clinical trial, India plays a very key role. There should always be a consideration to include sites from India. It not only expedites the recruitment, it also brings in cost efficiencies. So all these sponsors must consider India as an important site. And like I mentioned, we have a good number of patients. We have sites also. Uh, we'll have to. Uh, what is absolutely mandatory is that patient safety is a major concern for the authorities when they are approving any protocol. So that needs to be very carefully looked at. Adequate risk management should be built in the protocol. They have already taken certain considerations, like I mentioned, that they don't allow phase one studies of product developed outside India in India. So that's a strictly no-go. We cannot do that study at all. And then if when the studies are happening in parallel in India and other countries, it's always good if we have an approval from a regulated uh, country much before that when we are applying for Indian approvals. That helps expediting the approval. And we have subject expert committees supporting Indian regulator in approvals. These are actually the subject matter experts, KOLs from that therapeutic area. So they very critically review the protocol. In fact, they give very good inputs. Sometimes some considerations are important from India perspective. So they inform about that and they discuss, they share their concerns. So that's a very good thing. So, I mean,
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think that should motivate most of the sponsors also to go to the step to India and to try running a study there. As I said already, I see a lot of opportunities. It's not only a matter of money and cost effectively, but also time. I mean, when you can recruit patients faster than in other regions of the world, it's of course that's what all sponsors want: good recruitment to complete a study as fast as possible, and that's a huge advantage in India for sure.
yeah, and one thing which is not very well tapped so far in is the India's capability to do the pharmacokinetic studies. So there,
Yeah.
India have developed a lot of expertise, uh, but mostly we are doing the BAB studies for approval of generic, so bioequivalent studies for generic approvals. But we know that there are a lot of clinical pharmacology studies happening during the clinical development, like food interaction studies or formulation bridging studies. So all those studies can also be planned in India, uh, and I think this is something Indian CROs, which are well established, they have very strong processes, have undergone a number of inspections. They can add like studies in special populations or studies in females. Those kind of things
Yeah.
can also be added.
Great, thank you very much, Deepa. It was really interesting to learn more about India and how the clinical study environment looks in India. Thank you very much for your time and for all the good recommendations. Thanks. Yeah, and I also hope that you liked our video about clinical studies in India. Please leave us your comments, your questions, subscribe our channel, and see you the next time. Bye bye.